That morning, Los Angeles International Airport buzzed as usual. The loudspeakers echoed flight announcements at regular intervals, blending with the hurried footsteps of travelers, while soft sunlight streamed through tall glass panels, casting shifting silhouettes of constant movement. Everything seemed routine, just another typical morning in aviation, a place where people rarely paused long enough to truly see the faces moving past them. Among the crowd walked a couple making their way to Gate 17. They made no noise that stood out, yet there was something about them that drew glances, a particular calmness, the kind cultivated by those long accustomed to walking through the world beneath scrutinizing eyes. Nathaniel Reed, a black man in his early 40s, wore a crisp white shirt, a light gray blazer, and an old-fashioned wristwatch whose rim bore scratches from time. Beside him walked his wife, Elena Reed, her hair pinned high, her face composed, eyes sharp. She wore a simple navy blue dress and wheeled a compact carry-on by her side. They weren't celebrities by any measure, but every movement they made spoke of poise, restraint, and a quiet certainty of those who understood their place in a world that, more often than not, refused to treat them fairly. They approached the boarding scanner where a female flight attendant stood, her posture rigid, her eyes steely, lips pressed into a flat line. Her name was Lauren Whittaker, a veteran with nearly 8 years of experience at Westway Air, known for her precision and rigid adherence to protocol. Lauren also had a reputation for letting personal bias seep into moments that should have remained purely procedural. As Nathaniel and Elena came closer, they said nothing, just extended their hands to scan their tickets like everyone else. But at that precise moment, Lauren hesitated. Her eyes darted from the e-tickets to their faces, suspicion flickering across her features. "I'm sorry, I need to verify your booking information," she said, her voice polite, but tinged with a barely veiled chill. Nathaniel tilted his head slightly, still courteous. "Of course. These are first-class tickets. We booked them 2 weeks ago." Lauren said nothing. Instead, she stepped back, pulled out a phone linked to the airline system, and began entering data. She looked over at them again this time. The glance lingered as though trying to pinpoint something that felt off. Elena turned slightly toward her husband, frowning. "Did you notice the way she looked at us?" Nathaniel nodded, his polite smile unchanged, but his eyes beginning to harden. "I did." The tense minutes passed before Lauren returned. "There appears to be a discrepancy in your reservation. I'll need you to step aside while I contact a supervisor to sort it out." Her words followed corporate protocol, but the way she gestured toward a small bench near the wall drew attention. Heads began to turn. Some people frowned. Others pulled out their phones under the pretense of scrolling, yet clearly recording. A few began whispering, not loudly, but enough to create a noticeable tension in the air. Elena tightened her grip on her handbag, her voice quiet but firm. "We deserve to know why we're being separated like this." "It's just a routine check," Lauren replied, now meeting Elena's eyes with unapologetic firmness. "Sometimes the system flags irregularities." "Irregularities," Nathaniel repeated, his tone low but crystal clear. "We booked our seats, paid in full, names match, arrived on time. What exactly is irregular here?" Lauren didn't respond. Her face paled slightly, but she tried to hold her composure. In that moment, what captured attention wasn't just that a black couple was being stopped before entering first class, it was their reaction. They didn't yell, they didn't get aggressive, they didn't pull out a phone to retaliate. They simply stood their backs straight, eyes steady, silent yet unyielding. There was something in that silence that made Lauren feel unsafe. She turned away again, this time to call the on-site supervisor, a woman named Miriam Fields. Miriam was known for handling delicate situations, often called in to diffuse tension before it boiled over. She arrived in 3 minutes. By then, the scene had gathered more than a few quiet observers. Miriam took over smoothly, reviewed the tickets in the system, listened to Lauren's explanation, then turned to the couple. "Apologies for the inconvenience. I'll sort this out right away," she said, her voice calm but efficient. Nathaniel nodded once. Elena still said nothing, but her eyes now held something different when they met Lauren. Yes, no longer guarded suspicion, but a quiet, aching sadness. She wasn't angry, she understood. She had seen this too many times in her life. Lauren felt it, and for the first time, she began to feel unsure. She hadn't expected her little precaution to be noticed this deeply, but more than that, she hadn't expected to feel regret. As Miriam efficiently confirmed that the tickets were perfectly valid, Lauren stood frozen. A bead of sweat slid down her temple. A single thought echoed in her mind: I shouldn't have let a feeling guide my judgment. Moments later, Miriam said, "Everything's confirmed. You're cleared to board." "We sincerely apologize for the delay." Elena responded softly, "Thank you. But an apology doesn't erase what it feels like to be doubted just because of how we look." Lauren heard every word, even though Elena never looked back at her. As the couple stepped past the scanner, and the green light lit up, a quiet nod from the system confirming what had never been in doubt, Lauren felt something tighten in her throat. A rare feeling after nearly a decade on the job. Shame. It seemed like the incident had passed, but Lauren didn't yet realize that from that very moment, a series of consequences had begun to ripple, subtle at first, but soon growing far beyond anything she could have imagined. From what she thought was a harmless hesitation, Lauren Whittaker stood still at Gate 17 long after Nathaniel and Elena Reed had taken their seats in first class. The aircraft doors had closed, but inside her, a door remained, a drone of doubt, unease, and something else she couldn't quite name. She kept telling herself she just followed protocol. But Elena's gaze, quiet, non-accusatory, carrying a sadness far too familiar, made Lauren feel like she had just stepped out of a silent courtroom. A courtroom where the verdict wasn't spoken, but rendered through a gaze that pierced deeper than words. Lauren returned to the operations room, trying to convince herself it was over. But then her phone screen lit up. A message from Senior Oversight read, "Lauren, a video of the Gate 17 incident is circulating. Media is picking it up. Call me immediately." Her fingers froze. A video. She hadn't seen anyone recording, or had she? The elderly woman near the entrance. Silver hair, phone in hand, perhaps it was her. Lauren tapped into the airline's internal comms app. A video was already circulating on the company's internal alert channel. The footage was slightly shaky, but clear enough to capture her stern face. Her voice calm but detached as she questioned to black passengers. In the middle of the boarding flow, there was no aggressive tone, no overt slur. But someone had added a title that changed everything. Black couple held back at first class, got a procedural check or subtle bias below. The comments had surged past 100 passengers recounting similar experiences, others demanding a full internal review from Westway Air. Lauren set her phone down. For the first time in her career, she no longer felt in control of the narrative. On board the aircraft, Nathaniel sat quietly, head tilted toward the window. He hadn't spoken since takeoff. Elena flipped through the in-flight safety magazine, though her eyes weren't reading a single word. The leather seats, the soft cabin lighting, the plush amenities of first class, it all felt oddly distant. "They looked at us like we were taking someone else's place," she said softly. Still holding the magazine, Nathaniel responded, "To some people, we'll always be in the wrong place, even with valid tickets, dressed properly, having done nothing wrong. We're still a question mark to them." Elena turned toward her husband for the first time since boarding. Her expression softened, but I saw something else in her eyes too. Hesitation, fear, as if even she didn't know why she doubted us. Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. "That's the saddest part. When people can't even see how deep their biases run, how automatic it's become." Elena nodded. She picked up her phone and opened a group chat titled Board of Equity Watch. It was a civil rights monitoring network for service industries, where she was a senior contributor. She hadn't planned on sharing this incident, but someone had already uploaded the video from the gate. A member of the community had witnessed it and shared it online. The story was no longer just theirs. She sighed. "Nathaniel, I don't think we can stay silent this time. He turned to her, his voice gentle. I don't think so either. Back at Westway Air's Emergency Communications Office, Senior Media Director David Mercer stood at the center of a high-stakes crisis meeting. The video played on screen, accompanied by live analytics showing its spread across platforms. The hashtag was already trending, Flying Willow Black. David's tone was firm. This is escalating. Mishandling this could lead to a full-blown PR disaster. A junior PR staffer asked. Have we identified the couple? Yes. Nathaniel Reed, creative director at a major San Francisco media firm. His wife, Elena Reed, civil rights attorney, and a core member of the national airline equity watchdog. The room fell completely silent. David looked up, his voice low but unmistakably clear. We didn't just inconvenience to passengers. We triggered a public incident involving the people who are legally astute, well-connected, and understand how to transform a personal violation into a societal reckoning. So what's our move? Someone asked. David's gaze locked onto the screen. Reach out to them. Now. Before the Federal Press Corps gets ahead of us. Miles above. Nathaniel received an email from Westway Air's official representative. It was a formally worded apology, along with an invitation for a private meeting to openly discuss the incident and their experience. Elena read it silently, then shook her head. They're afraid of the backlash, not interested in understanding. But it's still an opening. Nathaniel said gently, if we stay silent, nothing changes. If we speak up this time, it could make a real impact. Elena paused. In that instant, memories returned, being asked to change tables at restaurants, having their bags searched at boutique stores, being misnamed at conferences, tiny indignities that scarred deeper than they appeared, accumulating into a wound that never fully healed. She nodded slowly. All right, but we're not accepting an apology behind closed doors. We demand a public dialogue and a full internal investigation. Nathaniel smiled. And I'll back you. Like always. Back at the airport, Lauren had just finished her shift when the notice came in. Administrative leave of 3 days. Pending internal review. She sat down slowly, reading the words again and again. She no longer dared to open social media. Her face had become the poster child of unconscious bias, something she had always thought of as someone else's problem. Now it was hers, and yet, surprisingly, what stirred inside her wasn't just fear. It was something else, an awakening. 3 days after the incident, the names Nathaniel and Elena Reed had become headlines across major outlets: New York Herald, The Atlantic Voice, and even the morning segment on MSNBC. The hashtag Flying Willow Black was no longer just a trend, it had become a national wake-up call. One news segment opened with a now-viral video. Lauren Whittaker standing firmly at the gate, arm outstretched in a gesture that halted. Opposite her, Nathaniel and Elena stood still, neither angry nor confrontational. Just a single look shared between them, silent, but impossibly weighty. In a modest apartment in San Francisco, Elena sat amid a sea of papers, printed reports, and scribbled notes. On the table was the draft of a speech she was preparing for the upcoming congressional hearing on airline equity. Rare bipartisan investigation convened to address implicit bias in commercial aviation. Nathaniel walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. He placed one gently before his wife and sat down beside her. Elena, are you sure you want to take this all the way? He asked softly. Life won't be the same after this. Elena looked up. Her eyes no longer carried the pain of a woman humiliated at an airport gate, but the resolve of someone who had endured too much, too often, in silence, and had finally chosen to stop being quiet. If we don't speak up, who will, Nathaniel? She replied. How many more children of color will grow up believing they don't belong? How many women like me will be pulled aside just because of how we look? He met her gaze and nodded. Then I'll be the one filming your speech. We'll post it everywhere, not just the hearing room. Elena smiled, her voice softening. Because I'm not just speaking to the committee. I'm speaking to everyone who has ever been quietly diminished. At the same time, Lauren Whittaker sat in a quiet cafe near her home, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses to avoid unwanted glances. No longer the composed gate agent overseeing passengers, she was just a woman reading through comment after comment about herself, accusations, outrage. Sociologists dissecting her tone, her posture, her judgment. She had never been called a racist before. But now, the label clung to her like something inked in permanent marker. What unsettled her most wasn't the temporary suspension, it was the question gnawing at her. When did I become that person? She thought back to her childhood. Her father, once a stern airport security officer, would always say, "Black folks cause trouble. Never let your guard down." She'd grown up hearing such warnings and once believed them to be hard-earned wisdom. But now, she wondered, was it wisdom or inherited prejudice? A ding from her phone broke her thoughts. An internal email from Westway Air, an invitation to join a new initiative titled Dialogue Learn Transform, a program recently launched in the aftermath of the incident. Lauren read carefully. This wasn't mandatory training. It was a pilot initiative designed by an independent advisory panel, among others, by Elena Reed. She sat still. Life had a strange sense of irony. On the day of the hearing, the U.S. Capitol gleamed under bright sunlight. Hundreds of reporters swarmed the entrances. Crowds gathered outside, holding signs, "Dignity has no class," and "Implicit bias now. We belong in first class too." Elena wore a minimalist ash-gray dress, her hair neatly pinned. No jewelry, no binder full of documents, just a single handwritten page. Beside her, Nathaniel, holding the camera steady, ready to capture every moment. As she stepped up to the podium, Elena took a deep breath. In front of her sat rows of congressional members. Behind her, the press lights flared. But she felt no fear. What she felt was relief. For the first time, she could tell her story, her full story. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elena began, her voice steady, deliberate. "I'm not here to ask for pity. I'm here to ask for reflection, honest, uncomfortable reflection. How this industry has, often unknowingly, upheld standards that exclude." Each sentence peeled back a layer of social silence. She didn't rant. She didn't accuse. She shared her lived experience off random searches, mistaken identities, and baseless suspicion. As she reached the final paragraph, Elena paused. She looked directly into the camera lenses, though speaking to millions watching. "We're not asking for privilege. We're asking for a seat, not just in first class, but a seat with dignity, with humanity, with the right to simply exist." The room rose in a standing ovation. The next day, Elena's speech went viral across every major platform. Celebrities, politicians, and everyday citizens alike expressed admiration. On TikTok, a new movement emerged. Justinese either users shared personal stories of quiet injustice they had once swallowed. Westway Air was forced to respond. A full press conference was held. The CEO appeared publicly, offering an official apology to Elena and Nathaniel. More importantly, they announced sweeping reform. Mandatory retraining for all staff, a new independent oversight board, and a direct reporting channel for passengers who had experienced discrimination. Lauren Whittaker received a follow-up email and invitation to be one of the first participants in the Dialogue Transform pilot program. At first, she hesitated. Then she tapped accept, not to protect her job, but to begin at last understanding herself. The meeting room at Westway Air headquarters that morning looked nothing like any mandatory training Lauren had ever attended. There were no dry slideshows, no end-of-session quizzes. Instead, there was a circle of soft-upholstered chairs arranged in the center of the room. Everyone seated at the same level, no podiums, no microphones. Just warm lighting and a heavy silence that pressed on the air like a weight. Lauren sat in a corner, eyes fixed on the wooden floor, as if searching for something to hold onto. She had almost canceled, had almost used the excuse, awaiting the outcome of the internal investigation. But in the end, an unnamed stirring inside her, perhaps guilt, perhaps the hope of redemption, had brought her here. The facilitator was a woman of Asian descent in her early 50s, named Mei Lin. Her voice was calm, her eyes carrying the quiet of someone who had seen much loss. She opened the session with a single sentence: "Everyone in this room once believed they were right." Lauren flinched. The words hit her like a bell in a quiet chamber. She had believed she was right when she asked to re-verify the tickets, when she made the Reeds wait like everyone else, when she blocked them at the gate. It had all been according to policy, procedure. But not once had she asked herself, was I being fair? The dialogue session began with an exercise. Each participant was asked to share a moment when they felt misjudged because of their race, gender, or something not written on their employee badge. Lauren remained silent. An older man spoke of being asked for ID 3 times at security, simply because he was Middle Eastern. A young woman, eyes glistening, recalled being called the wrong name by a flight attendant 3 times, even after correcting her gently. Then, a calm, composed voice began to speak, a middle-aged woman with natural curls and unwavering poise. It was Elena Reed. Lauren froze. Elena didn't look her way. She spoke of the moment she was held at the gate, of the feeling of having her basic humanity stripped away in minutes. But what struck Lauren wasn't what Elena said, it was how she said it. There was no bitterness, no attack. It sounded more like someone recalling a scarlet one that needed scratching to hurt, but one that stung just from memory. Sometimes, the most painful part isn't being denied, Elena said quietly. It's the look someone gives you, the look that says your presence is a problem. Lauren's throat tightened. That was exactly what she had done, in it in words, but in posture, in the way she held herself back, in the way she reached for the intercom. Every gesture had said one thing: I don't believe you belong here. During the break, Lauren stepped outside into the small garden terrace. She sat alone on a wooden bench, watching planes ascend into the sky, machines that now felt like they belonged to a different world. Mei Lin approached. She didn't offer platitudes, didn't scold. She simply handed Lauren a cup of hot tea. Is this session hard to sit through? She asked. Lauren nodded. I feel ashamed. Mei Lin smiled gently. That's a good beginning. Some people spend a lifetime without ever realizing that. I don't think I'm a bad person. Lauren whispered. I was just doing my job. You're not bad. But maybe, unknowingly, you've helped uphold a system that is. Lauren fell silent. She had never viewed the airline industry through that lens. She had always seen herself as a small cog in a larger machine sticking to rules, timing, and protocol. But now, she realized, those very rules, if unchecked by compassion, could become weapons. That afternoon, they moved to the next exercise, mirror reflection. Each person was asked to sit directly across from another, maintaining eye contact for the full minute. No talking, no reactions, just seeing. Lauren was paired with Elena. In those 2 minutes, Lauren didn't see a media victim or an angry black woman as tabloids had crudely labeled. She saw a mother, a wife, a human being who had just wanted to board a plane like everyone else. And Lauren had become the wall. When the timer ended, Elena said nothing. She simply nodded. And Lauren felt something heavy fall away from her shoulders. It wasn't forgiveness. It was truth, undeniable and without an escape hatch. At the end of the day, Mei Lin invited everyone to write a letter, not to send, but to address to their former self, a note, a confession, or a promise. Lauren wrote, I used to think being serious about my job was enough, but I forgot something. Seriousness without empathy is dangerous. I let other people's fears and old prejudices guide my decisions. Starting today, I will not try to erase my mistakes, but I will live differently. As Lauren stepped out of the dialogue circle, a gentle rain had begun to fall. She didn't rush like she usually did. She let the rain soak into her hair, her clothes, as if it were a quiet ceremony of cleansing. She didn't know if she'd keep her job, but she knew the woman walking out of that room was no longer the one who had blocked the Reeds at the gate, and that, at least, was a beginning. 3 days after the group dialogue session, Lauren sat at her kitchen table in her small apartment, both hands wrapped around a cup of cold coffee. Morning light filtered through the window, casting a pale glow on the gray-white walls, making the space feel even more bare. Yet inside her, for the first time in weeks, something had begun to stir, light, fragile, but unmistakably real. She hadn't slept well, not out of fear of being fired, but because of the words she had written in that letter that echoed endlessly in her mind. Live differently. But what did different mean? Where did it begin? Could someone who had once embodied bias somehow become part of undoing it? A notification chimed from her phone, startling her. Dear Ms. Lauren Hayes, we respectfully invite you to attend a private session with the Westway Air Executive Board today at a p.m. location, floor 17, room 3C. Topic: Internal reform recommendations and opportunities for redemption. Lauren read the message again and again. Opportunities for redemption. Those words tightened something in her chest. Not from fear, but because, deep down, she knew she was ready. Floor 17 of the Westway Air headquarters felt different from the cold austerity of the executive levels. This space was open, designed for policy innovation teams where people gathered not to defend status quo, but to attempt what was right. When Lauren stepped into room 3C, she was surprised to see Nathaniel Reed already seated inside. He rose when she entered and gave a slight nod. No hostility, no exaggerated grace, just an expression clear-eyed and aware, the look of someone prepared to listen, but equally prepared to challenge. Beside him sat Alma Sterling, Director of Human Resources, the one who had signed Lauren's temporary suspension. At the head of the table was a man Lauren didn't recognize, who introduced himself plainly. Jeremy West, head of the Corporate Culture Reform Task Force. Today is not about interrogation. It's about dialogue. Lauren took a deep breath. Thank you for letting me sit face to face, she began. I'm not here to justify anything. I'm here to understand. Alma raised an eyebrow slightly, caught off guard by the calm in Lauren's tone. Nathaniel said nothing, his gaze fixed on her. Lauren continued, her voice tight but firm. I used to believe I was being fair because I applied the rules to everyone equally. But I didn't see that when rules are used without empathy, they can become tools of injustice. The room held still. When I looked into Elena's eyes, I saw myself in it as the one harmed, but as the one who had caused harm without knowing. And I know a simple apology is not enough. But I'm here because I want to work to make amends. Nathaniel slowly placed his pen down. Do you believe someone like Yusumi, one who directly discriminated, can lead reform? He asked. His tone wasn't accusatory, but it wasn't forgiving either. Lauren met his eyes for the first time. Maybe it's because I was part of the problem that I can now see exactly what in the system allowed me to be. I'm not trying to erase what happened. I want to use it as a foundation to rebuild. Alma nodded slightly. Jeremy scribbled something down, then spoke. We're forming a new internal working group, Reflect and Rebuild. It'll include victims, cultural consultants, and employees who've been involved in past incidents. If you agree, Lauren, you join as a voice of reflection, not as a role model, but as someone learning from the ground up. Lauren felt her heart pounding, not from panic but from clarity. This was the path she needed to walk. After the meeting, when the others had left, only Nathaniel and Lauren remained. You don't owe me anything, she said quietly. But if you have something to say, criticism included, I'm here to listen. Nathaniel hesitated, then sat back down. You know, I didn't get angry that day because we were stopped, he said, eyes distant. I got angry because in your eyes, we never had a chance to be right. Lauren swallowed hard. She remembered her own gaze that day, suspicious, cold, judging. My father was a pilot, Nathaniel continued slowly. He used to say, it's not the error in the cockpit that brings a plane down. It's the silence, the unwillingness to report the error. He turned back toward her. Today, you didn't stay silent. That is a beginning. Lauren's throat tightened. There were no words worthy of reply, only silence. This time, not avoidance, but acknowledgement. That evening, Lauren reopened her inbox, a place that, for weeks, had been flooded with media storm, accusations, mockery, even threats. She didn't reread them all, but she no longer felt afraid, because somewhere within the thousands of words written by others, she had begun to write new words of her own, with actions, with dialogue, with the courage to admit she had been wrong. She began drafting her first proposal, Passenger Interaction Guidelines, recognizing unconscious bias in multicultural environments. At the top, she added a single handwritten line, written by someone who once failed to see and is now learning how to truly look. Monday morning at Westway Air headquarters began with an atmosphere that was noticeably different. The hallway on the 17th floor home to the Reflect and Rebuild Culture Reform team was quietly crowded. Hot cups of coffee steamed in hand, but conversations were sparse. News had traveled faster than expected. Lauren Hayes would be speaking at the program's first public forum, representing not just the reform group, but as the individual directly responsible for the incident that had thrown Westway Air into a PR crisis. She shouldn't be the one speaking. A longtime media team member snapped at a colleague in the cafeteria. But she understands the issue from the inside. Who wants to hear an apology from someone who's never done anything wrong? The debate rippled through departments, subdued, tense. It wasn't easy to accept that someone who had made a serious mistake might now serve as a voice for change. But there were also quieter voices, more patient ones, who watched and waited. Lauren knew all of this. That morning, she walked into the office with a calmness in her chest, not the calm of confidence, but of having stood face to face with her own deepest fears. She no longer avoided people's gazes. If they judged her, she accepted it. If they stayed silent, she waited. But what mattered most now was that she no longer feared herself. In the conference room, Jeremy West, lead coordinator of the Reform Task Force, spread out the agenda for the upcoming public dialogue. The session will take place in the auditorium on the 5th floor. It will be recorded for internal use. Attendees include staff reps, flight crew members, affected parties from previous incidents, and notably Elena Brooks, the woman discriminated against in the case involving Lauren. Lauren paused at the sound of that name. Elena's face host quiet, aching eyes. That tension-laden silence surfaced vividly in her memory. She agreed to come, Lauren asked. Jeremy nodded. Calm. She didn't agree out of forgiveness. She agreed because she wants to witness whether this reform is genuine. That sentence echoed in Lauren's mind all day. That evening, she received an unexpected call. It was Nathaniel Reed. Elena agreed because I encouraged her, he said directly. But I also told her this. If Lauren can stand before a crowd and face the truth, then it will be the first time I believe this company actually wants to change. Lauren gripped the phone. I know I haven't earned anyone's trust back yet, but I'm not stepping back. Don't expect someone to hand you redemption, Nathaniel replied, his voice low. You have to build it yourself, one step at a time. On the day of the forum, the 5th floor auditorium was packed. The air was tense, almost suspended, like every breath was waiting for something to begin. On the stage, 3 chairs had been placed, one for Jeremy, one for Elena, and one for Lauren. As Lauren stepped up, all eyes turned toward her. No applause, no heckling, just silence this time. A silence willing to listen. She stood center stage, no script in hand, no teleprompter. She began with the name the media had tied to her for weeks. Some call me the catalyst, others call me a symbol of failure. I don't resent those names because they reflect real consequences. She turned toward Elena, seated only a few feet away. Ms. Brooks, I know I can't ask you for forgiveness, but I want to thank you, because your silence that day forced me to finally listen to myself. It was the first time I realized, when a black woman remains silent, it's not weakness. It's because she knows if she speaks, she risks being pushed further outside the frame of safety. The room held its breath, and I, the one in power, did nothing to break that frame. I reinforced it. Elena met Lauren's gaze. No nod, no shake of the head. But her eyes had lost their guarded edge. Lauren went on, her voice slower but unwavering. Westway Air doesn't just need new policies. We need to change how we see ourselves in every situation. No one is born knowing how to do the right thing. But if we can't face our own wrongs, then nothing new can ever begin. Jeremy then invited Elena to speak. She said just one sentence. For the first time, I see someone willing to build a foundation from their own failure. And then the applause began it for perfection, but for courage. At the end of the session, after most had left, Lauren quietly packed her things. Jeremy approached her. The leadership team is planning a policy reform summit next month. They'd like you to give the opening address. Lauren looked up, surprised. I think someone else might be more fitting. Jeremy smiled. They're not choosing you because you're flawless. They're choosing you because you're changing, and they want others to know that change is possible. That night, back home, Lauren sat in front of her computer. For the first time in years, she opened her personal journal. She typed the first line. I used to believe only good people had the right to speak up. But today, I believe this even those who were once wrong, if brave enough to change, can become the spark for something better. And she smiled, gently. Just 3 days after the public forum, Lauren Hayes felt as though she had weathered a silent storm, not one of media backlash, but an inner storm where every value she once clung to had been shaken, dismantled, and forced to be rebuilt from the ground up. That sharing session had sparked something no one in leadership had anticipated. A wave of voices from within. In internal employee groups, private forums, and informal crew meetings, stories once thought buried began resurfacing. Tales of how racist jokes were brushed off as office humor, of promotion requests denied without reason, of surprise inspections that always seemed to happen during shifts staffed by Asian and Latinx flight attendants. Lauren read each post, and every line felt like a blade cutting, not because she was being accused, but because she had once been complicit in the silence. That afternoon, she received an urgent email from HR. A veteran flight attendant named Monica Alvarez had officially filed a complaint against Vice President Daniel Moore, accusing him of discriminatory behavior and deliberate obstruction of her advancement. Over the past 4 years, Daniel Moore, a heavy name, he was the one who had personally reinstated Lauren after the Elena Brooks incident, the one who had defended her in that first boardroom meeting, saying, "We don't abandon those who choose to make things right." And now, he was at the center of a complaint that could upend the reform image Westway Air had worked so hard to build. Lauren felt a sharp tightness in her chest. That evening, she sat down with Jeremy West, the coordinator of Reflect and Rebuild. There were no briefing folders, no PowerPoint decks, just a quiet conversation under warm yellow lighting in his small office, where unspoken worries hung thick in the air. "Do you believe Monica?" Lauren asked, voice steady. Jeremy looked at her long enough that she had to turn and meet his eyes. "The question isn't whether I believe her," he said calmly. "It's whether we have the courage to investigate the truth when it doesn't align with our comfort." Lauren nodded faintly. She knew this would be the biggest storm she'd faced since Elena Brooks. The next morning, Lauren went straight to Monica Alvarez's office. It was modest, neat, with only one framed photo on the wall. Monica with her mother and younger sister, all three wearing Westway uniforms from decades ago. Monica had eyes that were both gentle and unflinching. She invited Lauren in without pleasantries, without fear. "Are you here because of your role in the reform group?" she asked bluntly. "Or because you owe me a nod from when my promotion got denied back in 2021? Lauren froze. She remembered that moment. Monica had been nominated to lead the regional flight crew, but her file was quietly dismissed. Lauren had said nothing. "I'm here because I don't want to repeat that silence," Lauren answered quietly. Monica stared straight into her. "I didn't file this to destroy anything. I filed it because if I didn't, others like me would keep getting erased." Lauren sat down. For the first time, there was no distance. They spoke for over an hour about suspicious team meetings, about Monica being removed from major international flights, about an executive once telling her, maybe try dressing less Latino. It was all documented, all corroborated. That night, Lauren opened her laptop, ready to write a proposal recommending Monica's case be moved to an independent investigation team. But her hands hesitated. They were shaking, not from fear of Daniel Moore, but from fear of what she was about to choose. To speak up meant turning against the man who had once stood up for her. To stay silent meant betraying everything she now stood for. A new email arrived from Daniel Moore. Lauren, I assume you've heard about the complaint. I recommend you remain silent until the internal review concludes. Don't let recent emotions drag you into unnecessary opposition. Daniel, the last line felt like a veiled warning. Lauren read the message over and over, and in that moment, she realized the cost of being protected was unconditional loyalty, and she no longer wanted to be protected that way. The next morning, in a special reform task force meeting, Lauren was the first to speak. I propose that Monica Alvarez's case be moved to an independent investigative body, with participation from external experts, and for anyone uncomfortable with that suggestion, remember this: if a company can't be transparent with itself, it will never earn trust from the outside. The room was silent. Finally, a mid-level director asked, you do realize this could cost you your biggest supporter on the executive team? Lauren took a deep breath. Then I'll stand on the only thing I have left, the truth. After the stormy meeting, Lauren Hayes thought she had braced herself for the fallout, but she underestimated the power of a system that feels threatened. The very next morning, a wave of anonymous emails began circulating in the internal inboxes. Whispers, murmurs, subtle insinuations about Lauren's personal motives, about her cozy ties with the press. One post on the employees' private forum even suggested she was using the reform banner to consolidate personal power. No names, but the tone was unmistakable, cold, calculated, and deliberate. And Lauren knew exactly who was pulling the strings behind the curtain: Daniel Moore. That afternoon, she was summoned to the office of Eleanor Vance, the Director of Human Resources. Unlike previous visits, there was no warm tea, no polite nod to welcome her. We're conducting a review of your role in the Reflect and Rebuild group, Eleanor said calmly. There are signs you may have exceeded your authority. Lauren stayed silent. She didn't need to ask why. She knew this wasn't an investigation. It was an unspoken verdict. No conclusions have been made yet, Eleanor added, but you will be temporarily removed from the group pending review. Lauren felt like the air had been pulled from her lungs. She left the room without saying a word. What she felt wasn't rage, but a hollow ache, the kind that comes from realizing that injustice doesn't only come from the outside. Sometimes it comes from the very hands that once clasped yours in solidarity. Later that afternoon, a quiet message arrived through the internal app from an unexpected name: Ethan Blake, a young flight attendant, usually quiet during meetings, once mysteriously pulled from a major event roster last year. Hi Lauren, I have something. I've debated for months whether to share it, but after what you did, I can't stay silent anymore. Meet me at 7 p.m., 12th floor. Back break room. When Lauren entered the outdated break room, Ethan was already waiting. In his hand was a small USB drive. His face was tense, but his eyes were resolute. I recorded a conversation between Daniel Moore and the head of crew scheduling 6 months ago, Ethan said. He asked to have me removed from the international crew list because, and I quote, his voice is too effeminate, doesn't match our brand image. Lauren was stunned. And the worst part, Ethan continued, they laughed, like it was normal, like it was their right. He placed the USB into her hand. I don't want revenge. I just want to do my job without changing my voice, my skin, or my name. Lauren held his hand tightly. Thank you. You didn't just protect yourself, you've given hope to so many others being silenced. That night, Lauren submitted a 12-page report to the board of directors. In addition to Ethan's recording, she attached testimonial notes from dozens of employees who had reached out. Over the past 2 months, stories once buried now laid bare. Each account was documented, structured, undeniable. At the bottom of the letter, she wrote, "If my removal from the reform group is the cost of pursuing truth, I accept it. But understand this, from now on, no one will speak out alone." 2 days later, something unprecedented happened at Westway Air. The executive board issued an internal statement. Daniel Moore was being placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The notice made no mention of Lauren or FN, but everyone inside the company knew what had happened. On the lead bulletin board at headquarters, a single, powerful line appeared. "Justice doesn't begin with a verdict. It begins with a voice brave enough to speak." Messages flooded Lauren's inbox. Not loud or dramatic, just simple emojis, quiet thank you notes. One message made her eyes well with tears. "I'm Monica Alvarez. I waited 12 years for this moment. Thank you, Lauren. You've made me feel visible again." That night, for the first time in weeks, Lauren stepped out onto her apartment balcony. She drew in a deep breath, staring at the city skyline above. She didn't know what would come next, but she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer the woman who once only followed orders, no longer the one who shrank under authority, no longer the one who chose silence to stay seated. She was now Lauren Hayes, the woman who once bowed her head and then stood up. Monday morning at the 15th floor of Westway Air's headquarters felt different. Gone were the quiet footsteps and averted gazes of the previous weeks. Today, people paused, looked each other in the eye, and exchanged subtle nods as if silently acknowledging something that could no longer be ignored. Things could not go on as they were. An unprecedented internal hearing was about to take place, the first to feature external observers. A clear sign that leadership had been forced to act. Lauren Hayes entered the chamber in a soft gray suit, her face calm, but her eyes carried the weight of countless sleepless nights. She did not walk in alone. In the third row sat Ethan Blake, Monica Alvarez, and 5 other employees, once anonymous voices, now standing with their real names. At the front of the room sat 3 independent oversight officers, unaffiliated with Westway's leadership, a decision made after mounting public pressure for transparency. Next to them were 2 empty seats, one for Lauren, one for Daniel Moore. The hearing opened with the presentation of a preliminary investigation report. Chief Supervisor Helen Strauss outlined the findings: 23 employee testimonies for audio recordings, and over 100 internal emails relating to incidents of bias, discriminatory actions, and the misuse of administrative authority. "This is no longer about one individual," she said, voice firm. "This reflects a structural belief system where silence is rewarded and resistance is punished." Then it was Lauren's turn to speak. She did not read from a prepared statement. Instead, she looked directly at the panel and began, "I once believed that to survive in a large system, I had to adapt, be agreeable, be polite, avoid conflict. I thought that if I simply did my job well, everything else would follow. But I was wrong." She paused, letting the silence settle. "I've come to understand that silence is a form of complicity when we know something is wrong, and we lower our heads to keep our place. I used to be that person, and I'm not proud of it." Lauren glanced across the room. Her eyes stopped on Monica. "Until I met people like Ethan." Monica and dozens of others pushed into the shadows just for not fitting the image of those in power. "They never needed me to be a hero. They just needed me not to turn away." She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a folded sheet. "Here's a list of 12 unjustified departmental reassignments from the past 2 years. 10 of them are women, 8 are people of color or LGBTQ+, and they all share one thing in common: they had spoken up about unfairness." A low murmur swept across the room. Then the side door creaked open. Daniel Moore entered, wearing a black suit and his signature red tie, but walking without his usual air of authority. Lauren didn't blink. When asked to speak, he stood without notes, eyes cast downward. "I won't deny saying things that may have been inappropriate," he began, "but I firmly deny any intention to discriminate." Helen leaned forward. We have an audio recording of you instructing the removal of a flight attendant from an international event for, quote, not being masculine enough to represent the brand image. Do you care to explain? Daniel said nothing. Tension gripped the room. Then Ethan stood up. I'm the person in that recording, and I still remember after being pulled. I didn't sleep for 3 nights thinking something was wrong with me just because of how I spoke. His voice didn't shake. There was no anger, only clarity, as if recounting a distant but unforgotten pain. Today, I finally understand I wasn't the one who was wrong. What was wrong was his standard. The hearing continued for over 4 hours. One by one, witnesses stepped forward, each testimony a puzzle piece. Together, they formed a clear picture. Daniel Moore wasn't just a powerful individual, he was the core of a silent control system where dissenters were quietly pushed out. By the end, Helen Strauss made her formal recommendation. We advise the indefinite suspension of Mr. Daniel Moore. Furthermore, we recommend the formation of a systemic reform committee consisting of employee representatives, independent advisors, and equality specialists. Lauren exited the chamber at 4 p.m. The October wind swept through the glass corridor, fresh and cold, like truth. A reporter outside called to her. Do you see this as a victory? Lauren shook her head. No. This is a beginning. A system doesn't change after one hearing. But today, at least we stepped into the light. An early winter morning. Sunlight filtered softly through the transparent glass of the Westway Air Atrium. A space once symbolic of cold formality and sealed-off authority. Today, it had been quietly transformed, decorated only with a few simple signs, each bearing a single message. See me, acknowledge, and act. There was no champagne, no cameras, no grand speeches, just a simple circle of chairs placed in the center of the atrium, a space once reserved only for senior executives. At the heart of that circle sat an empty chair, a symbol of the unheard voice. Now placed at the center of the conversation, Lauren Hayes sat among them. No tailored suits, today only a soft ash-gray sweater, her hair tied neatly back, her expression calm, but contemplative. Around her were familiar faces: Monica, Ethan, Jenny, and Max, people she had once passed in hallways, or only knew through anonymous feedback forms. Now, they were here together, rebuilding something from the fragments of what once was. The Systemic Reform Council, born after the internal hearing, was formed in just 3 weeks. But the surprise wasn't in the speed, it was in the names invited to join. 3 frontline employees, 2 former internal complainants, and 1 advisor from a non-profit specializing in labor equity. Lauren declined the role of chair. She nominated Monica, the same Monica who had once nearly been fired for giving honest feedback. In a staff survey, for the first time, a voice once labeled as disruptive was now leading the very process of change. It was Monica who conceived the training program's name, See Me, Acknowledge, and Act. The program ran for 7 weeks, with open dialogues between employees and management, real-world simulations of unconscious bias, and most notable live hot seat sessions, where participants had to directly confront feedback from colleagues they'd unknowingly hurt. In one such session, a manager named Claire, who had once dismissed Ethan's promotion, broke into tears after hearing him say, "You didn't hate me, I know that, but you didn't see me." And sometimes, feeling invisible hurts more than outright rejection. Lauren didn't lead every session. She listened. She took notes. And when she spoke, she said only this: we're not here to reconcile. We're here to have the courage to face our role in a system that once caused harm. In the final week of the program, Westway's board of directors hosted a public roundtable. No podium, no media, just a circle of chairs where board members sat face to face with the people they'd once known only through HR reports. One board member, Catherine Morrow, spoke quietly. "I've been in aviation for 28 years, and this is the first time I've truly heard the voices of those who keep our flights running, not through data, but through pain, exhaustion, and hope." After that dialogue, an internal announcement was made. Westway Air would establish a Department of Culture and Equity, reporting directly to the executive board. It would have veto power over personnel decisions where bias or inequity was suspected. This wasn't a concession, it was a long overdue acknowledgement. Late but not too late to salvage trust, Lauren didn't release a public statement. She gave no interviews. Instead, she wrote a letter to all employees, printed and posted in the crew lounge. If you've ever felt unseen, if you've ever believed your voice was too small to change anything, if you've ever hesitated, afraid of losing your place, then remember, it was you who held your ground when hope was fading. You are the ones who made this possible. Not me, not the board. You. On her final day before passing the program's leadership to Monica, Lauren left the office with a small suitcase. No one knew where she was headed. A week later, in a short email to her former colleagues, she wrote, "I'm not leaving because I'm tired. I'm leaving because I believe when a system begins to listen, the mission of the one who shook it awake is complete." Down on the first floor, in what used to be Westway's wall of awards and accolades, a new plaque had been installed. Etched onto it were the names of those who helped build CME. No titles, no hierarchy. Just one line beneath each name, one who chose to see when others turned away. Ethan was invited to serve as the lead facilitator for the next round of CME. Monica became the full-time coordinator. And in a quiet cafe near the airport, Lauren sat reading applications from other airlines, hoping to bring the CME program to their teams, this time in Chicago. This story doesn't end with applause. It ends with quiet acts of conviction from people once seen as ordinary, now quietly redefining what justice, dignity, and courage can mean within a system that once forgot all three.